I welcome you all to this session. Very good evening to all of you. And my particularly thanks goes to all who have been able to sort of make it to this particular session, which we are here together to discuss the edited volume by Dr. Salah Punathil. Hope I have pronounced your second name right, Salah. Please correct if I'm wrong.
No, it's right. It's right.
Okay. Dr. Salah is currently at the University of Hyderabad, and his published volume, which is Lines and Passages, Reimagining Migration and Borderlands in South Asia. So we have the editor of the volume with us and a panel of discussants who are quite competent in the field, and they're here to discuss and carry this discussion forward. We have Professor Samir Kumar Das, from the former professor, the University of Calcutta, Director, Institute of Foreign Policy Studies, also from University of Calcutta, who was once director of Calcutta Research Group, was particularly known for its research project on forced migration, and therefore, both in terms of his institutional affiliation and as well as his research in Northeast, particularly, which makes Samir Das quite a prominent name in the field. I welcome Professor Das to this particular session as a discussant. We have with us Professor Nabanipa Bhattacharjee, who is a faculty, Venkateswara College, University of Delhi, someone who has historical and political sociology as her area of specialization, research interest, partition, migration, anthropology of violence, Northeast Indian societies and cultures. She has written quite, publications are quite sort of extensive, and of course, a brief kind of an introduction cannot capture them in their entirety. So I would apologize. Unburdening partition, negotiating marginality, Assam's language warriors, language of love and death, through thick and thin reflections on Nirmal Kumar Bose in anthropology, forging and foraging ethnic identity are some of her works which reflect the kind of interests and areas in which she has specialized over the years. We have Dr. Nirmali Goswami, who teaches at Tezpur Central University, Assam, works particularly in the area of sociology of education, identity politics, gender studies. Some of our works particularly figure in the field of education, multiple identities, educational choices, classification process of language in schools, community rights and women in Khasi society, mapping the nature and extent of multilingual education in primary school. Once again, which kind of only tip of the iceberg, and of course, this brief introduction cannot really capture the length and breadth of their works that they have been doing for all these years. I particularly on behalf of both these RCs and Indian Sociological Society, welcome all three of you to this particular session of the evening, where the book discussion is going to proceed at along a particular line, which I thought would be best way would be start with Dr. Salah's brief note, maybe kind of an overview of the book and the volume that he has published, to kind of give us a sense of the major kind of an arguments of the book, the way in which most of the contributions in the volume have proceeded, and the kind of concluding remarks with which the book sums up the whole issue of migration and borderlands, particularly their relevance in South Asia. And then we would move on to our discussions of the evening and the three discussions that we have. And once the discussants finish discussing the book, we would throw the floor open for further reflections, comments, questions. And in terms of the time that we have, of course, with the permission of Dr. Suraj Beri and Dr. Pinaki Roy, who have been particularly instrumental in making this possible, something that was long overdue, and I missed Salah a kind of book discussion which was originally scheduled for the last sociological conference in the RC28 of the Indian Sociological Society. I do apologize to Salah for this, but we couldn't make it, and it was somewhat difficult to sort of organize and schedule that in the last conference that we had at Amaravati, and therefore some time had passed, and here we are today to discuss something which was long pending. So about 15 minutes, Suraj, Pinaki, 15 minutes to editor of the volume, and then 15 minutes each for each of the discussant, and then the remainder of time maybe for discussion. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, sir.
Okay. And I'm particularly thankful to Dr. Suraj Beri, who teaches in the University of Nagaland, and to Dr. Pinaki Roy, who teaches in a government college in Chandanagar in West Bengal, for making this possible, arranging this, and taking the pain of making this sort of communicating to all of us to make this possible. So without much ado further, I would request Dr. Salah Punathil to begin with his overview of the volume. So floor is all yours, Dr. Salah.
Hi, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amites sir, for this introduction. And first of all, I would like to thank entire team, RC1 and RC28 of Indian Sociological Society, particularly Suraj, Pinaki, Rakesh, and Amites sir for taking this initiative. I also want to thank Maitri Chaudhary ma'am, particularly for her initiative long back to have this. Also, I'm grateful to all the panelists who have readily agreed, who have expertise in the field, and really look forward to hear their comments on the book. I will not take much time. Perhaps some of the contributors can speak later after the panelists, and so I think I will very briefly speak about the book, introduce this, and maybe then it can be open to the panelists. So this book is actually a republished version of a special issue, came out in the Asian ethnicity last year, and which was actually a byproduct of a workshop we organized at the University of Hyderabad way back in 2023. And the workshop was for the young scholars who are working in the field of migration and borderlands, especially scholars who are doing ethnographic or who have just done ethnographic fieldwork in India's borderlands. So we had, to give a background, like we had 2 days intense workshop where some of the experts in the field of borderlands have come and sat with the students and had longer discussion, which turned out as kind of a publication eventually. And I'm very glad that we have it as in the form of a book and having kind of discussion. So to speak about the book itself, so the book deals with question of migration and borderlands, India's borderland, especially in three, four major sites of borders. One is Northeast, one is West Bengal borderland, and the one is India, Pakistan borderland, and also Nepal borderland. So we have also there is one conceptual essay, and there is also an afterword written by Professor Sheesh Hegde. So the prime aim of this work was to kind of expand this emergent literature in the recent past, anthropology and sociology of borderlands, which question some of the conventional way of doing or studying borderlands, like basically unsettling the binary of state versus society, instead of seeing borderlands as a state which is as a site where state imposes its roles and people resist it. We are going beyond that. The attempt was to look at the borderlands in terms of how life at the borderland is co-produced, and how do we make sense of much of the issues that we see in the border today. So we try to, so the book has actually divided in terms of four broad thematics. One is citizenship, another one is state and bureaucracy, third one is family, kinship and marriage, and fourth one is infrastructure, mobilization, militarization and surveillance. So all of these, the contributions in this book deal with any one of these themes, and looking at these different sites and try to look at the everyday life in the border sites. So, there are contributions which deals with the question of citizenship, especially in the context of Northeast India in the present time. There are works which deals with the question of state and bureaucracy. There are works which deals with the question of family, marriage, and cross-border migration. And there are a couple of essays that deals with infrastructure, militarization, and surveillance. So put together, what the volume contributes is basically expanding a field of an emergent field in anthropology and sociology of borderlands, which try to kind of go beyond some of the conventional way of reading questions like citizenship or bureaucracy or social processes like marriage, family life at the border, so on, or infrastructure and development and so on. So the insights gained from the works primarily demands also more attention to look at the nuances and complexities at the border, because we know that today life at the border and the questions and critical questions in the borderland is not merely confined to the site of border as such, but it is everywhere in the nation, including metropolitan cities and inland areas. And therefore, the book urged to look at borderlands and the question around life at the borderland is much more seriously than ever in the past. Instead of speaking more about it, I would like to stop here and perhaps can respond after the panelists. And I think it's also good if some of the contributors are here in the platform, and they can also respond to the in terms of their own individual contributions. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Salah. That's brief but succinct, kind of hits the nail perhaps on its head. And therefore, I think we should now move on to the panelists, the discussants that we have for the evening. May I request Professor Samir Das to reflect and comment on the volume. Samir, are you here?
I'm here, and I'm. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, thanks to Professor Mukhopadhyay, whom I always address by his first name, Amites. I begin with a word of thanks to Indian Sociological Society, to the two teams, RC1 and RC28, the organizers, and Dr. Salah Punathil and Dr. Suraj Beri in particular for having invited me to comment on the papers included in the volume, and I was requested by Dr. Punathil to comment on 3 papers. The first is by Priya Bose, the title of which is Infrastructures of Immobility, Maps, Mines, Militarization, and the Making of Remote Borderland in Kargil. I'm just reading out the titles of the chapters precisely because I assume that some of the attendees may not have gone through the book. The second paper is by Malvika Sharma, The Ongoing Partition, Narrative of Belonging and Separation in the Borderland of Kargil, Ladakh. And the third is by Rahul Ganguly, Migrant Aspirations, Migrating Dreams, Belonging, Materiality, and Migration in Urban Darjeeling. Now, I have 3 sets of comments, and I will club the first 2 papers together because both these papers actually dwell on Kargil region, which I must confess that I know very little about Kargil. And my third set of comments will be directed to Rahul Ganguly's paper. If you ask me that how can I sum up the first 2 papers which I have mentioned, I would say that both deal with Kargil region. So ethnographies are from Kargil region, excellent ethnographies, I must confess. And if you sort of try to ask me to summarize both the papers, I would say that this has been summarized by Malvika Sharma, and I would just sort of borrow one sentence, which is this, quote, political borders are hardly congruent with socio-cultural boundaries. So that aptly sums up both these papers. Priya's paper shows how development of logistics and infrastructure contributes to militarization, predominantly in 2 ways. One is that the development of logistics and infrastructure is a means of regulating the people and their movement in the region and keep them under constant surveillance. In international relations and foreign policy studies, we call it connectivity. The new emphasis on connectivity is articulated through such policies as Belt and Road Initiative in China, Act East policy, and its earlier avatar, Look East policy in India, and so forth. I have argued that connectivity is not connected history. And I borrow this concept of connected history from Sanjay Subramaniam's work. And one important point of distinction between connectivity and connected history is that connectivity is a kind of connection that is subjected to surveillance. And connections, on the other hand, develop in history amongst people who inhabit the region. So connectivity kills connected history, for it bans any and every kind of movement and seeks to steer movement of population, freight, etc., through a given network of roads and passages. I remember, for instance, Guite's study on India's Northeast, which came out from Oxford University Press, where he argues that no 2 villages in India's Northeast were ever disconnected in the region's history, although the region is always considered as remote. The second reason is this, that army settlements in Kargil are designed in a way that triggers a crisis of habitable and cultivable land for the people. And they are forced to live dangerously on slopes and hilly terraces. Connected history and its closure, for instance, that of Ladakh, Skardu Silk Route, do not constitute 2 binaries. And the problem lies there. Neither the erstwhile composite space of belonging is completely thrown out of existence, nor do the fractured units continue to hold within a single composite region any longer. And I draw 2 implications from out of it. One is Malvika Sharma claims quote, there is no other across the border, unquote. I think that this concept of other needs to be problematized and is much more complex than what we consider it to be. It's not simple self-other binary. Shall we say the other is multi-layered and there are different kinds of the other? And I draw from her ethnography. Zainab, Hussein's wife, I may have been mentioning the names wrongly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Zainab, Hussein's wife, and Zainab, who has become somebody else's wife without formally ceasing to be his wife, because suddenly she became a citizen of Pakistan. She is not just unrecovered. That's the official term which is used in these cases. She has become irrecoverable. She is not his wife any longer. Is she an other? Yes, she is, for she has no connection with him. But again, not quite, for neither of them can forget their connection. The distinction between being the other and being like the other helps us understand that. I think that we need to make a distinction between being the other and being like the other. When they meet years after their separation in Karachi, they refrain from alluding to their past, a past that is too frozen to leave any trace in the present. Perhaps we'll have no imprint on the future either. They probably had nothing to talk about, and their meeting perhaps plunges into deep silence. This newly discovered Zainab embodies an other who, borrowing from Hegel, represents difference, not opposition. And Hegel was emphatically making this distinction that not all differences are opposition. My second implication, which I draw from here, is that connected history and its closure point to what Homi Bhabha would have called the irreducible two-ness. It's a two-ness which is insurmountable. If connected history is absent, then the absence does register its presence through the scars and bruises it leaves. I call it presence of absence. So you have, for instance, in Calcutta, there is one called, I'm just citing one instance from my own ethnography, Dhaka Kalibari, for instance. It's a temple which is not too far from where I stay, but then you know that it has its allusion to Dhaka in the sense that the refugees consider it as the same Kalibari which is reenacted in a new landscape. So that's my first set of comments, that I think that the other is a very multi-layered concept. My second set of comments is that many new roads have been constructed in Kargil post the war. But roads are not constructed in consultation with the locals who understand the region's geography more than the engineers or the bureaucrats. As a result, roads have been constructed and infrastructure developed in a way that seems to show up, as it were, the region's map to the enemy, making their task easier. I think that this figures in Malvika's paper. This often defeats the whole purpose of national security that the construction of border roads is supposed to ensure. And here comes my comment, that it appears that civil and military governmentalities move in two divergent directions. Now, Foucault would have called for reconciling the two governmentalities together. And please allow me to sort of refer back to Foucault's famous 1978 essay entitled Governmentality, where he says that governmentality is not about governing the territory, but governing the webs of relations that exist between the territory and its inhabitants. And the people, men, actually, Foucault has been using constantly the term men. And men, then again I quote Foucault, in their relation to other kinds of things like customs, habits, and ways of acting and thinking. And it's for this reason I see that Foucault would always consider this as one single network of governmentality circulating throughout the body social. But on the other hand, that these ethnographies seem to suggest that there are many governmentalities. And the challenging question I wish the ethnographers would have handled is that how are these sort of taken together? Amitesh, how am I faring in terms of time? How much time is left?
Not a problem. Please continue.
Okay. I was hesitating, but I think that I conducted an ethnography in 2017 in Dibang of Arunachal Pradesh. And Dibang, consists of two districts now, Dibang and Lower Dibang, which is inhabited by a tribe called Mishmis, which consists of a variety of clans. Now, it's called an international tribe in the sense that many clans live in China, adjoining China. Also, some of them live in Myanmar. Mishmis also live across the international borders adjoining Dibang, both in China and Myanmar. And reorganization of borders in the region started taking place since the late 19th century. McMahon Line, for instance, was drawn in 1914. Mishmis, by all accounts, were migrating across the international borders even after independence of India in 1947, notwithstanding that the border was drawn already, apparently with albeit tacit knowledge of the Indian army officers, and I have interviewed them, posted in the region. For the Mishmis were used as the eyes and ears of the security forces in a region which was sparsely populated, remote, and inaccessible, and gathering information through institutional channels was not an easy task. So that the security forces, as it were letting the Mishmis to migrate across the international border because they were considered as the eyes and ears of Indian state. It is only with the development of infrastructure and logistics in Arunachal Pradesh, the latest being Prime Minister's inauguration of the Salah tunnel, that remoter villages are sought to be connected with Arunachal Pradesh's capital. And the expectation is that once the infrastructure is put in place, then obviously that there would be immigration and the apparently sparse region will be populated. But exactly the opposite has happened. And I have checked, for instance, the census data, where there has been a decline in population as a result of the development of infrastructure and logistics. Why? Why does this happen? My ethnographies, for instance, suggest that the Mishmis lost their traditional means of livelihood, like game hunting of musk deer, black bear, and otter, and poppy cultivation, since each one of these is now banned, and the ban is strictly enforced as the villages are now brought under the surveillance of the security forces. As a result, they don't think worth its while to stay at home, even if the home is now relatively well connected. I come over to the last set of comments, which basically is addressed to Rahul Ganguly. Rahul's paper revolves around the idea of home and what migrant journeys do to the idea of home in Darjeeling. He actually deals with two sets of migrants. One, the migrants, the Nepali out migrants from the region and from India, and also rural to urban migrants within the district of Darjeeling. And he comes up with probably two interesting premises. One, as they migrate out of the country, gather money abroad and buy new buildings, set up homestays and purchase cars, unquote. They consider themselves and are considered by others as authentic urban dwellers. Rahul's words. The rural to urban, and exactly the opposite is also true. The rural to urban migrants are considered as inauthentic urban dwellers. I quote Rahul. It is as if the town is separate to him, an external object detached from his existence. Now, I will raise two sets of questions in this context and will look forward to having Rahul answer them if time permits. One is this, that how are we actually conceptualize the class element in this context? Class has become more important. Has class become more important than ethnicity? Are the Gorkhas or Nepalis then divided into classes to a point of jeopardizing their ethnic identity? Then why does, for instance, Gorkhaland happen almost at regular intervals? That's my first question. So in what way, for instance, class and ethnic identity are related to each other? And my second question is that is it a universal experience that he talks about? That you buy home and that you buy a real estate and a very pricey real estate, and then you come home. Is it shared by one and all or confined to, and I quote him, this is a phrase which he used, older middle class of Darjeeling? What about the people living outside the charmed circle of the older middle class? Do they have any different idea of home? I suspect so. And I am reminded of, for instance, particularly Lil Bahadur Chhetri's literary works, where, for instance, there is constant yearning of home, and particularly the subaltern's constant yearning of home. I conclude with just one sentence. If you say that it's middle class hegemony being established in Darjeeling, then one can say that the rise of neoliberalism has come a full circle and has thrown out of reckoning all the alternatives that I have been talking about. Thank you very much, but I once again congratulate the three authors on the successful completion of their ethnographies and coming out with excellent works. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shomita. As always, your comments kind of help me revisit some of my own learnings and try and unlearn them the way you take on borders, borderlands, and ethnographies of borderlands and the borders. We should move on to our next discussant in the panel, Professor Nabanipa Bhattacharjee. Am I audible? Can Nabanipa hear me? You need to unmute Nabanipa.
Oh, so sorry, Amiteshda. Yeah, hello.
Yeah, good to see you after a long time.
Yeah, same here, same here. So, all right. So, shall I begin? So, I'll take about 15 minutes so that we can have
15
a
minutes.
good.
Does 15 minutes suit you? I mean,
Yeah,
is it
suit.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what I will do is, I will just a minute. Just 1 second. Can you see me? No.
Yeah, I
Oh,
can see you.
okay. All right.
I hope
So,
everyone else can see
yeah. So
Nabanipa.
this is.
Yes, you are
Yes.
audible and
Okay.
visible.
Yeah, because I have to just, yeah. So, so what I'll do is there are 3 papers that I need to kind of speak about. One is by Ritoprio. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Ritapriya or it's Ritapriya, I think, Nondi. The other is by Debasrita Deb. And the third paper is by Dipshikha Behra. Now, what is interesting is that the 3 papers are about the eastern region, right? So we are looking at the eastern borderlands, and Bengal is one, and the other 2 are technically located in the northeastern region. So in the first one, so very quickly, I'll just, run through the paper, and then I have a few points to make generally about, reading, say, for instance, Sashija's essay or the discussion essay by Bani Gill and Salah and Gorki Chakrabarti, and also the introduction generally, just a few points about northeastern region. So in between borders basically again talks about the Bengal borderland, and this talks about the Malda district, and the focus here is on Bengali speaking Muslim women, and that is interesting. So of course it looks at this intersectionality of, gender and kinship and belonging, borders and all that, and how these women basically move to and fro. So in short, it highlights this politics of belonging in a borderland, which is of course fluid and multiple, ambiguous, and so on and so forth. The ethnography has been conducted in Malda, and the focus is, of course, everyday life. And that in itself is something very interesting, that how, borders come to life, or, the challenge that borders poses in everyday life. And these, so the women who were, who got married in Malda, and there was a time before the fencing where they would move to and fro, but life after fencing. So the paper basically is rich. And that's something that I really like, because I think we can, the theory bit anyway happens, but to collect data in a border region, and where the identities of these people are, always suspect, is a very, very difficult matter. I have, personally, gone through this. There was a time when Professor Uman, I was doing some work on Bangladeshi immigrants in Delhi, and I had to abandon it after a while because I just could not get any data. It was extremely difficult. So because nobody agreed, or nobody even entertained this idea that they were not legal migrants, and so on and so forth. So I think that's something that I'm it's really something to do to do this kind of field work. So what basically then this paper does is looks at these changes in the patterns of mobility before and after fencing. And of course, in the light of all kinds of, restrictive and precarious citizenship policies that we have at the moment in this country, and how we are actually kind of moving from the principle of a more inclusive principle of ius solis to exclusive ius sanguinis, and so on. So, and so therefore what, Nandi's paper does, so there's this whole concept of Asha Jawa, which basically means, just casual. Asha Jawa is a very casual, it's generally casually used, the expression, but it's no longer a casual Asha Jawa in the Bengal borderland. It's a hard task. And therefore, I think this whole idea of, a complicated idea of belonging puts women in this position of betwixt and between, the liminal presence, as, Turner would say. So that is, in brief, the first. The second one is by Debasrita Deb. This is also, all the papers are really, good. This is about ruptures in the life worlds, and this is the NRC in Assam. And I personally, I was born in northeastern India. Of course, it's Shillong, and then I grew up there. And I know personally, I know many who have gone through this. And it's an extremely important paper. It's good that, something like this, Salah's book carries. I'm really, it's a good one. It looks at basically 4 case studies kind of things. And the impact of NRC, in fact, the impact of omission from the NRC list, which was, the list which was published in 2017. NRC has a long history. I will not go, all of us more or less know about it. But I think it was the 2014 Supreme Court directive by Ranjan Gogoi and Rohington, Nariman, which kind of set it. And this is what happened finally in 2017. So she, deploys various concepts like irregular citizenship and so on, and looks at, this. Something, again, very personal. I was in Shillong just last week, and I've seen the whole, the insecurity and the problem with the SIR. This is the new kind of NRC. In the Northeast, it is particularly problematic. And I still have, roots in Northeast. So, and I have seen people worrying. I know a particular case where the name has not appeared. And I tried to kind of tell this lady that everything will be fine because SIR is not a problem. In Delhi, it is not a problem, but it's a real problem in the northeastern region. The same, I'm talking about Meghalaya, but it's across Northeast that, so all kinds of movements have been, how documents, how rolls and lists, electoral rolls, NRC lists have launched movements in Northeast India. And we really need to look at these, cases. So in the 4 case studies, there is a case of a Muslim, community represented. Then there's, I think, T tribe, Orang, I think, says that. Then there is a Hindu experience as well. And this is also, again, interesting. Barak Valley, again, has a very interesting history, and to understand borderlands and politics, we need to actually again go back to the past and see how Barak Valley was actually built, created, constructed, right? It's a good work. I liked the idea of embodied and immersive approach of Ingold that she uses. Right. The situation is really complicated. In Assam, for instance, there's a new paper by a friend of mine, colleague who teaches in Nehu, Binayak Datta. There's a new paper where he calls it Exceptional Citizenship in Assam. So, in fact, and to buy a place in Guwahati, he had to actually go back and prove that this is the whole, the entire genealogy, everything had to be drawn up, and only then he could, buy this. So, but I'll come to this, the few, the important points that I wish to make. So basically, this is unmaking of citizenship in Assam. The third and final paper is the poesis, which is basically, the act of creation of migrant subjectivities, and it is done through Mia poetry. This is by Deepshika Behra, good one. And this is basically how, poetry becomes a weapon of resistance in Assam. And this has helped in making of this new subjectivity. And it is, of course, an NRC period development. We never heard of Mia poetry as such. They were definitely being written, but as we know that silences are, they have their own politics. But things came to fore only during the NRC thing. And there, it's a good one. The field work was done in Borpeta region, that's in Lower Assam. And so that is basically it. Now, there are a couple of just 4 important points that I wish to make, and if necessary, we can again elaborate. But the first is in all these studies, I think what we need to do is engage sociologically with partition. In case of Eastern India, I'm talking about Eastern India, partly Northwest also, but definitely Eastern India, and what has come to be known as Northeastern India, which is totally a creation of partition from a frontier region to a kind of exclusive region. So I think partition and sociology we need to theorize, and we really need to understand that bit. The second important point in all of this is the exceptionality of Northeastern India in every sense, whether it's borders, whether it is having a donor ministry, it's having Northeast studies, every way. Now, what has this exceptionality meant for people who are marginalized in that region? So that is something that I think we really need to, again, look at very seriously. And therefore, we also come to this question of exceptional citizenship, that every rule is different when it comes to Northeastern India. Nothing kind of applies. Right. So, for example, I'll give you a very quick example of a recent launch again by the government of Meghalaya about having an online verification of tourist thing, because the inner line permit would not be granted to Meghalaya because of various reasons. But this is again an issue. I was in fact asked, I have a 100-year-old history in that town. I was asked on my way to Shillong this time. They stopped me at a checkpost and I said that, how can you ask me? And they did. But they let me go. But then they will not let everybody go. That also depends about who they're talking to and so on. So I think this whole exceptionality business needs to be really questioned and understood again in the context of borderlands. The third would be the tribal communities of northeastern India. And there, I don't think the volume has any essay on that. I may have missed. Salah will be, if I've missed, correct me. But I think there's good work being done on the Khasi Jaintia interface with Sylhet plains. I know in Nehu. So I think tribal communities and partition and borderlands has to be kind of worked upon. Sanghamitra has done some work on the Garos, I know. I think Shorgojyoti also does, but I'm talking about the southern part of northeastern India. I think there's a lot to be done. Finally, just something about the Muslims of Assam, of northeastern region. And this I also came across in this paper by Behra, is that, there are different, so when we come to the Mia issue in Assam, there is a hierarchy of Muslims in Assam. So all Muslims are not Mias, and all Muslims, so it's complex, right? So I think this is something that we really need to keep in mind, and hence go back again to history in a very kind of draw from it. And this is something that we need to keep in mind, whether it's the NRC or any kind of claim and so on. So we need to make a distinction between the Assamese-speaking Muslims, like the Gorias, for instance, or Morias. So that is a different category altogether, because here language becomes important. So in northeastern India, language and religion are kind of, they are intertwined. And then we have the Sylheti-speaking Muslims, who are definitely not the Mia Muslims. In fact, there's a lot of internal, clash, conflict here, right? Because Sylhet was part of Assam. So Sylheti Muslims who are in the southern part of Assam, in the Barak Valley, not Barak Valley, Karimganj region, which is now again been renamed as Sribhumi. This is that's an important border area. Again, I think good work can be done there. Then there are the Kachari Muslims. There are Manipuri, Meitei, Pangal Muslims in places like Bashkandi and others. And then, of course, there are the Maimansingh Muslim, Maimansingh, etc. kind of Muslims, right? So that is all, I think. And finally, I think all the other essays, Sashija's essay, as always, is absolutely brilliant. And I loved, reading through it. That's all, I think, and more once we, take thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabanipa. Thank you so much for sticking to the time that we have. Suraj, yes, yeah, sure. So we have Dr. Nirmali Goswami as our next discussant. and after hot discussion, we'll probably have another 15 minutes or so to have a quick round of responses from the contributors who would be here today, who are present, to sort of respond very quickly to some of the questions being raised by the discussants. So may I now request Dr. Nirmali Goswami to sort of discuss the volume.
Hello, am I
Please.
audible? Yeah.
Yeah, you are audible.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Amites for inviting me to speak. And I'm really thankful to the RC01 conveners and the RC28 conveners, everyone who actually made it possible. Along with, of course, Dr. Salah Punathil for making this effort and putting me in the panel where I'm learning from some of the students whose work has actually pushed me to think about issues of migration and border thinking. And I'm really grateful to Salah for giving me this opportunity, because this makes me look at and reflect at things which otherwise would have perhaps escaped my attention. And I would have really liked to look at all the contributions, but like others, I have focused on three. And these, apart from these three contributions, I do have some overall remarks, but only if I have enough time. Then I'll come back to it, or maybe I'll start with where my previous speakers, Professor Nabanipa, had left, where she was talking about the overall contribution that the book makes. Maybe from there I can begin and come to that. So forgive me for sometimes reading out, because otherwise the ideas become very scattered. So in order to maintain to the time schedule, I will be reading out some of my ideas. Where I feel that the book makes a very important contribution is to of course talk about the shift in scholarship that has, and placing the book in that context, that shift in scholarship on borders, where we do no longer treat them as geopolitical lines, to look at bordering as an ongoing processual activity which has social, political, and cultural dimensions, which are produced through movement, law, bureaucracy, identity, imaginations, infrastructures, and everyday social practices, as Dr. Punathil had initially briefed us. Now, this particular, but while this has been a general shift in the literature, what makes it more significant is that it is trying to locate it in the South Asian context, where the historical experiences of colonialism and partition, as rightly pointed out by both the speakers, and the post-colonial state formation has also produced borders in specific ways that cannot be understood only through the existing frameworks that are applied elsewhere. And I'll come to that when I talk about the specific contribution of the essays that have been made. So in this book, Lines and Passages, Reimagining Migration and Borderlands, what we see is that there is one thing which is very clearly emerging, is the emphasis on ethnographic work, so that a processual understanding of border emerges from the lived experiences of the participants who are inhabiting the experience of border making in different sites. It could be as stark and exceptional, like an incarceration center, in detention centers of West Bengal, or it could be as routine and ordinary as, forming marital alliances, planning about education when you're talking to your neighborhood. And that is what makes it a bit distinctive. That's why what I find interesting here are these 2-3 issues. That one, it focuses on the everyday practices, documentation, kinship, and neighborhood interaction, which is very unique. And work, ideas of waiting, mobility, memory, institutional encounters. So, and the contributions, at least the ones that I read, they address these different dimensions of bordering. I wish to read the book more thoroughly, looking at all of these, but I'll focus on the 3 essays that have been that I had the privilege of choosing also, in a way. One was by Swargajyoti Gupta's Moving Borders in South Asia, which is kind of developing a kind of a central kind of conceptual framework along with the editorial interventions and the afterthought and all other contributions and the discussions. The second one which I read was Shoful Pathan's essay on identity, migration, and embedded cosmopolitanism, which is interrogating multiple Muslim identities in Assam. The question that was where we left in the previous discussion, that why is it that Muslim identities in Assam are not being discussed in much more detail. The third and very important contribution that I have read here is Mrinalini Subba's Practicing Border, contextualizing criminality of mobility at the West Bengal Bangladesh border. Now, again, it looks at the bordering practice by looking at detention centers and how women prisoners talk about it after having been convicted, detained, and serving their prison. So, three very different things, but the best approach I felt was to read them in dialogue with each other so that we don't miss out on the connections while looking at the specific. So when we come to Swargajyoti Guhai's work, it's interesting and very, she is of course putting her work, moving borders in South Asia as a kind of dialogue with all existing contemporary shifts towards understanding borders, not as a phenomena that is static, that is fixed for all, frozen in time, and in line with the contemporary scholarship, which talks more about borderland, processual aspect of regimes of making border and all. In particular, her dialogue with Thomas Niles' work, along with those of the ethnographers, including her own ethnography in the northeastern Indian region, she's doing it. But at the same time, she's making a distinction, which I feel is very important, is coming back to the question of state of exceptionalism that was just pointed out. What she's saying, she's making the proposition that borders are best understood not as fixed territorial objects, but as moving composite formations, right? And that travel through legal institutions and embodied practices and imaginative geographies, while linking it back to the idea of the Westphalian notion of state, which is based on the idea of bounded territories. And of course, when we talk about border studies and migration in today's India, we acknowledge the lived aspect and the processual aspect of it and the everyday aspect of it. It would be a grave injustice to not talk about or to not frame it or anchor it in the dominant framework of state making practices, which has its ways of being constituted, but also shaping the discourses and practices in which ordinary citizens participate. So she asked how borders move and actually conceptualizes her idea of border through the idea of movement and through what social processes they are constituted and become embedded within everyday life. That is where I feel the tension that I could see between the editorial introduction and this conceptual framework. The first essay is attempted to be resolved, and I later it could be discussed more in detail, that how borders move through what social processes and how they become embedded within everyday social life becomes the major conceptual move that is made here, while acknowledging that there is a broader processual turn in border studies while simultaneously extending that literature. Am I audible? So what she highlights
Fine, yeah.
is that the border cannot be reduced to the geographical edge because the practices through which state regulate movement increasingly are occurring far away from territorial frontiers. Whether it is identity verification, citizenship documentation, detention centers being set up, biometric technologies, refugee camps being set up, or even administrative procedures or electoral procedures, they are all functioning as sites of border making. They are no longer coinciding exclusively with the geography of the nation state. Recently, when I was almost at the 0 point of central India, I was in Nagpur, and there is a 0 point, which is supposed to be the the center of the where a person who is very much troubled by the extra processes required to get registered into the SIR and still trying to understand it through the insistence that if we do not get into the SIR, then there will be infiltration, at the very zero point of the nation state. So the very idea that this has moved away from geographic borders can be, and yet to keep the idea of state at the center of it is something that I find as a very interesting conceptual move that has been adopted here. So she is, of course, engaging in a dialogue with Thomas Neil's work of, theory of the border, which is by some account, one of the most influential recent attempts to rethink border through movement rather than territory, and yet she grounds it on South Asian context, particularly in the when we look at the East Asian or East Indian territories and border marking, it becomes particularly relevant. So, by insisting on the interrelationship between physical, legal, embodied, and imaginative dimensions, these are the four dimensions of the movement when she's conceptualizing border as to be conceived in terms of a composite, which is created through these four aspects of movement. The movements are no longer just physical. It's not that the borders move or are moved physically, but they move when there are legal innovations. That's something that we have been witnessing, like by changes into law of related to citizenship, by making changes into the laws of electoral processes. This is when borders move legally. She introduces the aspects of embodied and imaginative movement in her understanding of border, which is also very interesting, particularly when we look at the later studies. Embodied, what do we mean by embodied aspect of movement of a border? When the bodies, certain bodies get marked, there is and as different and as the alien bodies, and they move and they are detained much not just at the point of border crossing but also later on. One imaginative movement of border is when through imaginative processes borders are being built, renewed, and reimagined again. So this is the first essay which was of Mohai, and which brings in which helps us to anchor the other two studies as well, and which are more ethnographic in nature. One is by Shofiul Pathan, which is on identity, migration, and embedded cosmopolitanism, situated in Nagaland district of Assam, focused on the multiple Muslim identities, where the key contribution of Pathan lies in showing that border, residents do not experience borders only when they are crossing international checkpoints, but the generational after effects of it. It could be real or it could be imaginary as well. And how he attempts to do it is that his ideas about border are woven into neighborhood interactions, religious participation, kinship network, common language use, marriage, and everyday encounters. So it is through these ordinary practices that people continually negotiate their sense of belonging. This concept of embedded cosmopolitanism that is used here is being it is emerging from routine interactions rather than elite mobility. So there is one distinction that I found, and I felt like flagging, is that sometimes these ideas of cosmopolitanism has been located in Europe and Northern American context, which look at where the ideas, where a certain kind of literature emerges on diaspora making and so on. But it is only when you read this essay along with, Sarvajyoti Gohai's introduction, then you try to, kind of link it differently, that this is a different kind of an imagination that need not be rooted through European and Western experiences. So embedded cosmopolitanism is the concept that he's using in his work to talk about a way of transcending the identity that is attributed to the imagined idea of a migrant. So the essay focuses on the kind of negotiations that Muslims make and try to adapt and build and forge a new identity through a kind of cosmopolitanism, which is rather than being elite, is more embedded, coming from down. Now, this is a kind of a ambitious conceptual move, but he is trying to justify it by questioning that the idea of methodological nationalism by drawing on narratives of younger generation of Muslims from upwardly mobile families. Now, this is another move. This is a study which is located in an urban center. It's not a typically rural peasant class which has been at the focus. What he is doing, he is drawing on narratives of these upwardly mobile younger generation of Muslims, and then he is bringing up this idea. Now, if I come to the last essay, which is Mrinalini Subba's Practicing Border Contextualizing Criminality, it is a very different context altogether, where she's drawing on the idea of criminalizing mobility. When and through what processes criminality is introduced by certain legal interventions, and how women prisoners are negotiating their ideas about legality and criminality, where the key contribution of this now I'm almost at the end of the time, the main idea that she's presenting is one, she's presenting it from the perspective of women prisoners at the almost at the bottom of the power structure, and then foregrounding their imagination of complete awareness of border transgression as a routine, ordinary activity. It has been very well brought out through ethnographic account, and at the same time distancing themselves from attributing it a criminal character. So they make a distanciation between what is actually criminal and what is illegal, because this is everyday activity dependent on their work, on which their work life is dependent. There is a very interesting class dimension implicit here, which I wish she would have discussed more, because it clearly shows that the labor market is open to the idea of having immigrant population, legally acknowledged immigrant status, that population, why taking it, because it helps keeping the wages down at almost abysmal level, while the legal machinery works in a different manner. So there is a kind of a complex network and nexus which are not just reinforcing but are at times in conflict with each other. This is one very interesting aspect of the study which I wish would have been discussed more. So this is where I will have to, I think, stop, although there are so many interesting themes and ideas. I'm sure we will have enough time later to discuss all this. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry that I have to keep reminding you. I'm so sorry about that. It's simply, that we have this kind of a request from the Indian Sociological Society, because around the same time, two RCs are going to be scheduling their discussions today, around more or less at the time. One has come into conflict with the other, and which is why there's been a bit of a hurry at our end to wrap it up. Now, with this three discussants commenting on the volume and looking at a set of three essays, trying to comment and critically engaging them, I would sort of leave the floor open, particularly for the contributors, if they are present today, this session, to respond very briefly to the comments being made on their contributions. The three papers that Professor Das had discussed, three papers that Professor Nabanipa Bhattacharjee discussed, and three papers Dr. Nirmali Goswami discussed. If there are contributors present today with us, would you like to respond to these comments? Maybe to Professor Das first, and to Dr. Nabanipa Bhattacharjee second, and Dr. Nirmali Goswami third, in that order. Maybe minute and a half or two. I'm sorry that I'm kind of forcing this time management down your throat. I'm so sorry about this. Yes, we have somebody raised hand here. Galaxy A075G. May I know who you are, please? Yeah, please.
Yes, sir.
Please.
My name is Rahul. I wanted to
Rahul,
respond
you are one of the contributors, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Okay, please.
Yeah. So thank you, sir, for the comments. I'll respond very briefly. So firstly, no, I don't think class has replaced ethnicity in that sense. I just think that when we talk about ethnic identity or Gorkhaland, that is one level of analysis. But what I wanted to do is look at urban belonging and urban class politics and things from that aspect. I mean, we can talk about it in more detail later. That is the first thing. And the second thing is, no, again, sir, I don't necessarily think that in this paper or in my larger work, I'm looking specifically at what the middle class is thinking. But there is obviously an aspirational way in which people who belong to the quote unquote peripheries of the town also want to, find their ways of belonging, and material infrastructure or material belonging is one of them. So that's what I've tried to highlight, that those who traditionally are not seen to quote unquote belong properly to the town, how do they find a way? So yeah, that's broadly. So I just want to bring in class to the analysis of urban life in Darjeeling without in any way diminishing the role of ethnic identity or the demand for a separate state.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for your quick responses. Is there anyone who wants to, contributor who wants to reply and respond to Professor Das's comments?
Hello, good evening, sir.
Hello.
This is Priya Bose.
Priya Bose. Okay, Priya, your paper was discussed by Professor Das, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed,
please.
Professor Das. So I think Professor Das didn't have any question for me as such, so I'm not going to respond to that. But I think I just felt that I was, I'm in agreement with whatever, was commented by Professor Das, because and one thing that really stayed with me and kind of concludes my paper as well is, he said that connectivity, there are two things, connectivity and connected histories, and connectivity kills the connected histories. So I think that really summarizes my paper, because, the overarching idea is that development is going to do away with, it's going to bring forth the connectivity and all that stuff. But, how it actually kills local connections and how it actually brings forth immobility in the region is what, my paper was specifically focusing on. And another thing that Professor Das also kind of mentioned was how when he was doing his fieldwork, so the Mishmis actually spoke about, how they were losing their traditional ways of living. And therefore, because, losing their, traditional ways of living, whatever changes, like whatever so-called development was happening, it didn't really have a lot of meaning to them, as such. So I think that really is the crux of my paper, and I would just invite someone else to kind of take over from there.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Are there contributors present who would like to respond to the comments made by Professor Nabanipa Bhattacharjee and Dr. Nirmali Goswami?
Hi, this is Ritupriya.
Ritupriya, you are responding to the Professor Nabanipa Bhattacharjee? Okay, sure.
Yes. So firstly, I would like to thank all the discussants for their reflections, and thank you, Professor Bhattacharjee, for commenting on my paper. I don't have a response as such, but just to advance the dialogue that we have been engaging in for the last 1.5 hours. So we were sort of discussing how belonging has become politically relevant in today's times, right? And Professor Bhattacharjee flagged the issue of SIR in the current context. And my paper concludes, and at the time that it was being developed, I had actually claimed that NRC has not been implemented in Bengal, or people are actually living the fear of an NRC-like exercise. And now we have SIR in place, which complicates the idea of belonging all the more. As it is betwixt and between, as I draw from my paper. But right now, the state is also trying to make belonging more administratively legible and politically legible. So I think this advances the complications of belonging and borders all the more. So that is what I wanted to put forth, and thank you, everyone.
That's
Can I have one point? Can I say something? Ask her. She's done
very,
it.
very
Okay.
quickly, Nabanipa.
Acha, nahi, theek hai. Maybe we can connect.
Yeah,
So
maybe,
I was
maybe
just thinking.
you can sort of email exchanges
No,
and all of that.
yeah, because I think Suraj already has
suddenly
already
this
said.
ISS kind of embargo has.
They cannot have two meetings together. That's why they are asking.
Yeah, that is
because
also
probably they
yeah,
allow
total
that Zoom connection to us, and then once we wrap up, then it will be made available to